listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Happy Thursday evening, folks. Welcome to my show. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. And if you're just listening audibly tonight, you can also come over and watch the video simulcast over on my YouTube channel. And that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. You can also join the live chat room that's going on over there on my YouTube channel right now. Conversation's already started. So I want to thank you for coming over and watching the show tonight. And what else did I want to bring up in the introduction here? Probably nothing really vital off the top of my head because I can't remember what it was, and I didn't jot down any notes. But I want to welcome you to the show. Yesterday we did something that was a little out of the ordinary. And while we weren't broadcasting over on Odyssey last night because we did a live stream over on my YouTube channel, we were talking about politics. We were talking about what happened yesterday in the capital of the nation. And I will tell you something. I am no insurrectionist, but I want to ask you guys to make a comparison in your head about yesterday. If you believed that your voice was not being heard, do you have a right by the Constitution to have that redressed, to present your case? And if you don't believe your case is being listened to, what's the final step? I do know in the Second Amendment, which is the second only to the first being freedom of speech, what does the Second Amendment tell us? That we have the right to keep and bear arms. And you had many of the Founding Fathers in the Federalist Papers wrote about the deeper meaning of that amendment, saying that that amendment was there to ensure the citizens of this nation that they always had a personal recourse against a tyrannical government, a last-ditch recourse. All right? Now, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of unpacking there. What's a tyrannical government? When is your voice not being heard? When is it, according to the founders, was it okay to start as Thomas Jefferson said, a little revolution? And so all of those things need to be a little bit unpacked, and you need to look at that and understand all of it. But here's the question that's at the core of that. If we are given the right by the founders, not given the right, told that we already possess the right to rebel against the sitting government if we find that it's tyrannical, why would it be wrong for people to protest on the steps of the Capitol? Some of them, they broke into the people's house, the house we all own. They broke into it. They broke the law. They did some damage. They broke some windows. They broke some chairs. They tipped over a podium. Some things like that. A couple hours worth of cleanup, it looks like. They didn't burn anything down. They didn't kill anyone. They weren't there to kill anyone. You had some crazies in the mix and things like that. So what do you do? At what point do you say that the American people can be fed up enough to make an act like that happen, or to do what was done yesterday? I am going to break into, and it wasn't like by stealth by night. They just bashed the locks in, bashed some windows out, and they walked into the Capitol building. While there was in session, they wanted to be heard. And it wasn't the 50,000 people that were there that did that. It was a much smaller number. So at what point, since the only reason I brought up the Second Amendment is that the founders made a way for, constitutionally, to recognize that the people have a right to revolt against a tyrannical government. Look at the American Civil War, which took place about 170 years ago? 1865, so about 170 years ago. So here's the big question. Why were not all those people tried and convicted as traitors once the war was over? Well, it was because, and why weren't their leaders all hung for treason? because it wasn't considered treason. They seceded from the Union, and there was a civil war and civil strife. Now that's a much different scenario than what we have here. What did Ulysses S. Grant say at Appomattox Courthouse as Robert E. Lee and his troops were riding away? His men were booing them and jeering them on either side of the road, and Grant came out and silenced them and said, he silenced them and rebuked them, and he said, the rebels are again our countrymen. So, bearing some of these things in mind, is it insurrection to say I so differ with my government, I am going to storm the Capitol building and the Senate chamber and present my case? I want to be heard by these people. And it wasn't just some lone wolf, some weird guy. It was a bunch of people did this. You had 50,000 people there yesterday, more, some of the reports say, that were there protesting. Now, what's a protest? We've seen all kinds of protest in our country over the last year. Black Lives Matter, all of these things that people are protesting. Protesting, the left has always stood for those protests. Why isn't the left supporting the protests of people who believed in something they didn't? We were told if we didn't believe or support the BLM movement, that we just had to go along with it because it was there right by the Constitution. So there are all kinds of things in this mix and all kinds of things in this stew. So what do you do with that? I look at yesterday and I say, these people had a right to do what they did by gathering on the Capitol steps, which where a lot of protesters gather. Somebody brought up, I heard somebody say something about COVID yesterday, and I hope they all die of COVID. And you know what? How's that for tolerance and love from the left? Somebody disagrees with you, has a totally different point of view, and they're protesting it. And while we all had to, if you disagreed with the Black Lives Matter movement and you had to support the protest because it was a constitutional right, and the left was constantly justifying what they were doing, not the violence, not the burning of cities, not things like that, but they were saying, hey, we understand why there's anger there. Well, can you understand why there's anger? Yes, sir. It's a different political topic. But are we not supposed to treat both these parties the same? How many people were hung for treason for burning down Minneapolis? 150 businesses of their neighbors. So, and somebody said, well, you can't use that as a comparative. It's a totally different kind of thing. Whatever. Same thing. It's people protesting something they believe in, on the basis of something they believe in. I listened to Joe Biden earlier today. He was given a speech, and it was labeled his reaction to yesterday, the events of yesterday. And I listened in for about 6 or 7 minutes before it started getting to everything else, and it was way off the topic. So I finally shut it off. But in the first couple of minutes, this is Joe Biden's characterization of the people who protested yesterday. He called it America's darkest hour. I can think of a hell of a lot more darker hours for America than a few people coming in and breaking a window in the Capitol building and busting a table and tipping over a podium. Nobody committed any acts of violence against anybody. But that was our darkest hour. He said it was unprecedented. I put a post up on my Facebook earlier today about events in 1930s where there was storming the Capitol building with no violence. It's not unprecedented. He said it's not dissent, disorder, or protest. He said, don't you dare, he uses, or don't you dare refer to the people yesterday as protesters. They're insurrectionists. It's a riotous mob, he said. Insurrectionists. Contempt for democracy yesterday. Wasn't that democracy in play yesterday? That 50,000 people can gather around the Capitol and present their case or show that they stand for one thing. It wasn't 50,000 people who stormed the Capitol, by the way it's being presented. It was a small sliver of that crowd that broke into the Capitol and made their way through to the rotunda and into the Senate chambers, or the House chambers. So, and what did they do when they were there? Sat down in the big chair, clacked the gavel, tipped over the podium, so on. And some of those people that were doing that have been shown to be people that, I don't care who they supported, they weren't supporting the cause that the 50,000 were outside. So, moving on from that, there's contempt for democracy. He said that President Trump has contempt for democracy in everything he's done since the day he entered office. It's the culmination of his position on everything, was yesterday. And then that's it. Right around the time I stopped, he started drifting off of that. And something I noticed was that his whole... It's like, can you talk about anything, Joe Biden, that doesn't involve degrading Donald Trump? Well, that's his approach. Well, that's the take the left has on what happened yesterday. Maybe there's some of you on the right that have that take. My take is different. I support protesting. I said it all through the Black Lives Matter stuff and all the burning of cities and things like that. I said, that's a disgrace. But for people to come out and peacefully protest, they have the right to do that whether you agree with them or not. If you don't think that their case was a solid case, I had somebody today. I put up a post about the woman who was shot yesterday, the 14-year veteran of the Air Force, Ashley Babbitt, mother to children. She was shot, and there's a video of it, of when it happened. They were pounding on the door, smashing the window of a door, and you see the Capitol Police shoot her through the window. And she was just part of the crowd out there, and dropped to the floor. And then everybody who was pounding on the doors, you know what, they cleared. If that was a riotous insurrectionist mob, why did they all back off and try to help her? And then the police were there also, too, helping her. And going to her aid, but she died, of course. So you look at all that. And I say, I'm looking over there at my notes. It's like it's a thing, an object over there, my notes that I took during that speech of Biden's today. And I am all for protest, and I'm all for what happened yesterday, up to the point where they violated the law. You can do a good thing or something you believe in. Not everybody has to believe in your cause for your cause to be a good, righteous, lawful cause. Those 50,000 people had a right to be there yesterday. They had a right to state their case. When they broke the law, they crossed the line. Breaking the law, what did they do to break the law? The lawlessness yesterday. Did they burn buildings? No. Did they leave graffiti all over the Capitol? No. Did they topple over in the rotunda all of those I don't know how many are there, dozens of statues. Did they topple those over and smash them? No. I saw a broken table in the aftermath. I saw a tipped over podium in the chambers. So what did they do? They broke into a building which is owned by the people, which represents the people. At the fore, though, were wackos and crazies. I don't care who they voted for. So that's the fallout from yesterday. I'm not drawing any conclusions yet other than to tell you that American citizens have a right to protest. They have a right to go and state their case. They have to abide by the rules, however, when they do this. Yesterday, some of the rules were broken, but not by all the protesters that were there. The thing they were protesting is not rendered null and void because some people broke the law. That's like saying Black Lives Matter because some people started burning the businesses of their neighbors, 150 businesses in Minneapolis. Does that negate or declare null and void their cause? And we should all look at them and say, those people are traitors and they should be tried for that. Maybe for property damage. Is the cause eliminated because a few did bad things? No. You don't have to agree with the cause. All you have to agree with is that, in principle, the people of the United States have a right to have their issues presented. They have a right to protest. And that's what happened yesterday. There was protest, and some of it got out of hand. That does not negate the issue. I'll leave it at that. But you got to have courage. You got to have courage to stand up for what you believe in. I'm going to do some spark courage here before we get into our lesson, which is actually a lesson I would like to avoid in a sense because it's so detailed. I'm going to have to give it kind of a light treatment. It's like you've seen those scientists where they take the chalkboards and they write all those wild equations all over the boards. It would be like trying to describe what each segment of those means in an audio format. Hold on, I dropped a matchstick. Let's see what it says. Oh, it's one we've had. Fighting procrastination. I was going to just leave it there, too. How ironic is that? I was going to pick it up after the show. Let's see what else we got in here today for spark courage, boldness. Let's see. Here you go. Offer help to strengthen in small ways. You can apply that any way you want. There it is. If I can get in there, the light's really bright today. Hang on. I got to shift that a little bit. There we go. So, offer help to strengthen in small ways. Do you offer help to people? I'm not talking about... I heard something on the radio when I was driving my kids to school this morning. Some woman was calling in and talking about, should I give $30,000 to my sister-in-law who needs some help, or a friend of hers, or shouldn't? And, that's not a small way. But we all have opportunities to help other people in our sphere of existence, in our sphere of influence. Help could just be giving somebody a thumbs up to helping them in a big way. But help other people. How often do you do that? That's just an encouragement. That strengthens your courageousness and your boldness when you go out and you say, I'm going to offer myself up in a small way to help you. You can think of any example you want, and there's not a lot of meat to that. And my head's in a different place, so I'm not going to dig into that too deeply and look for the esoteric meaning behind helping others. Excuse me, other than that we know that there are things that we can do every day with our family, with our co-workers, with people we brush shoulders with, rub shoulders with, brush elbows, whatever it is. Even in COVID, yes, at times we brush elbows with people. And are there ways that you can help, ways you can offer up yourself to somebody in a small way? Just to help, just to show that you're there. I've found that there are more and more occasions lately where I encounter people. I'm out with the kids and things, and people are doing something, and we talk with each other. Maybe people are starved for companionship because some of them have sequestered themselves for so long. But there are times that I find that just walking through the store and somebody says something and somebody overhears something and says, oh, yeah, that happened to me the other day too. And, it's a friendly conversation. Maybe we can use those opportunities when we see somebody who needs our help. And help doesn't have to be a crisis. Help can be just a little thing. And so I encourage you to look for ways to help people in small ways. And that's all the further I'm going to take that, because I don't think I need to preachify on anything like that. So we all kind of get that. We were talking about we're getting into Enoch again now. Now, some of this stuff gets really entangled. And it's a lot of, it's like trying to describe geometry and working out of geometric problems verbally. So telling this on the radio, I started to try to make diagrams, and there were so many diagrams, because what it gets back to is we're looking at, remember, the whole bigger issue we've been talking about is the topic of the holy language, the original language. And we established that it was Hebrew, at least the sources that I've drawn this information from. This is one theory, by the way. There are other theories out there. This is a theory about holy language. The Hebrew in its original form seems to match up to a lot of criteria that spells out creation, spells out the universe, spells out all these different things we've been talking about. Works on sound, the utterance of the word, the holy word. And this gets into frequency, and we talked about nodes. We talked about all these different aspects of sound frequency, how this played into Enoch, the book of Enoch, and how that he was called the original scribe, the man, the first human that God gave the holy language to. And when he did this, he gave him the ability to decipher units and measures and weights and all of this. And then we established with the time period and coinciding with not just biblical and other religious texts about a universal flood, but the science of the earth having been flooded at a certain time, all seems to coincide back to the 8 to 6,000 BCE period. And if this is when Enoch lived, and people right away they'll poo-poo the book of Enoch, saying, well, there's no copies of the book of Enoch other than, dates back to the 400s BCE. Well, yeah, Septuagint time. Same thing with the Old Testament. We don't have a lot of documents for the Old Testament beyond 400 BCE because they were all rewritten. This was all stuff that was stored at the Library of Alexandria. Was the same thing with the Book of Enoch. If Book of Enoch actually exists, it's the oldest book in humanity. But of course, it's got a religious trapping that it's attached to, so people want to disregard it. So we've been looking at all this stuff about Enoch, who he was. Did he build the Tower of Babel? Or was it his equations that helped build the Tower of Babel? Was he the architect and builder of the Great Pyramid, long before Khufu came along, Cheops, Khafre, all those names for him? Does it date back older than it is? And the Sphinx that is there? And we looked at all that, the channels, the water, how the water was used, what the pyramid might have been used for, the sound frequency, the frequency that was generated by water movement, and so on, and all that. We went through all of that already. And we talked about what were their goals. We got into the Freemasons. And that, frankly, Enoch really founded the bare elements at their foundational level of what became Freemasonry later. And there were some of those that used the holy language for nefarious purposes, to promote a new world order of things. But we found that the holy language was there to promote healing, balance, harmonization. It's all-encompassing, long-term objective for global enlightenment and liberation. And so compared to finding the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the 10 Commandments, or at least used to, this knowledge and the power that it wields is unimaginable. And by the way, on that whole thing of the lost Ark of the Covenant, the last we see of the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible is when, I want to say it's the Babylonians, it might have been the Assyrians, carried it off in the Old Testament times. They sacked Jerusalem and they carried off the Ark of the Covenant, and it disappeared into the mists of time forever. Don't hear anything about it after that. There are those who believe they found the Ark of the Covenant. I remember when I was in college, we're talking 40 years ago, that there were some people who, an outfit, and it was connected with Zionism and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem and so on, that they knew exactly where the Ark of the Covenant was. They said it was in chambers beneath where the temple used to stand at the Dome of the Rock, what is now the Dome of the Rock. That it's there. And there's all kinds of theories of it out there. But it's an interesting side point. We'll have to look into that one of these days. It's just a fun little rabbit trail to follow on the Ark of the Covenant. You know, you watch Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's a really fanciful version of some of the people who have supposedly found the Ark, search for the Ark, fight over the Ark. because the ark is supposed to be this very important vessel that needs to be part of rebuilding the new temple. We talked about the new temple being rebuilt as well. And so we talked about how if you study the past, you need to study the past to define the future. And that's why we're looking at all this, looking at the holy language. We talked about the Qabalah and the Ten Commandments, the oral law, aspects of the Qabalah that could be traced back to the 1st century AD. Surprisingly, it's Enoch again, who's the inspired precursor in all the Qabalah long before the oral law came into existence at Mount Sinai. And Moses wasn't the first to hear of it, as Enoch was given that knowledge long before, and therefore the oral law seems to be the same. You know what? I'm running overtime, so we got to go out to break. Folks, you sit tight. We're going to be right back.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, folks, we're back. Thanks for sitting on through that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. We ran a little overtime last segment, and I had to do a little hop, skipping, and dancing there. But that's what happens when you have topics and you only have an hour. One of these days we'll expand it to 2 hours. There's going to be days where I'm going to be able to fill 2 hours handily, readily. There's going to be days where 2 hours is going to be a tiresome albatross hanging around my neck. So we'll see. We'll see how it all goes and how the flow goes. We're a year and a half into this, so you'd think by now I'd have the flow down, but you know the way I am, the way I present things, the way I talk. Some days I could go on forever. Some days I got nothing. So let's move on with where we were. You're listening to this program on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over and see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. And at the same time, come on over and view my video simulcast of this show, airing at the same time over on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And the live chat room is one of the best things there. All the Intrepids over there talking. Come on over and join us. Conversations going on right now. And you can also view all the archives of this show, over 350, 360 of them, something like that, down below the main window in my YouTube channel. You'll see the Intrepid radio program. You can click on that and you can see all the episodes and go back through. Also, if you want to hit the join button tonight, hit that and you can become a member. When you click on that, you see 3 ways that you can become a member of this program. And yes, it takes your money from you, but in very small amounts. Every month, $2, or $5, or $15 if you're a zealot. So come on over to the Intrepid radio program, and I want you to hit the join button, join up, become a member, see the perks that you can get, and all of that. And by the way, tomorrow morning, Friday, we're going to do Just a Lousy Cup of Coffee at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. It's members only, those of you who are members. I'll put out an announcement. You'll see that announcement over on YouTube. There should be an alert that comes with that. And as the morning goes on and the hour goes on there, we'll open it up to the general public if we want to. We'll talk about that tomorrow morning. So for Lousy Cup of Coffee tomorrow morning. And now let's get back into Enoch. Enoch and the Freemasons. Enoch and this magical, mysterious, these numbers that are out there. I just got an announcement popped up on my screen. Star Trek Discovery season or series? I don't know what they're talking about. Another radio show. If you haven't seen Star Trek Discovery, it's gotten better and better and better. It's a good season. They're in season 3 this year, and I believe they've already been okayed for season 4. And then you got Star Trek Captain Pike coming. Strange New Worlds, it's called. That series is coming with Anson Mount playing Captain Pike. Those of you who don't know, Captain Pike in the Star Trek universe was the captain of the Enterprise with Spock as his, not his first mate, but his science officer, pre-Captain Kirk, that era. So it's really good stuff. So anyway, that's all aside. Let's take a little closer look at the holy language. And it talks about, and this is where we ended in the last segment, and sorry if it ran a little bit over for you. To study the past, you have to define in order to define the future, you have to study the past. And that was a Confucius thing. And we mentioned that the other day. We talked about that. We talked about the oral law at Mount Sinai. We talked about the Sefer Yetzirah, which include the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Midrash, this oral law. And aspects of the Qabalah can be traced back to the 1st century, later in the 12th. And Enoch is at the core of all of that. The Sefer Yetzirah. And that text explains the design concept behind the formation and the creation of all the things in existence. It was written to expand on the idea of how God used all the Hebrew letters to form the material world and create all that exists. That holy language at the very beginning of time. The Qabalah, the oral law, appears to revolve around the understanding of the Hebrew letters. And to understand God, you have to first understand the Hebrew letters with which He thinks and speaks and creates all things. He generated substance from which He formed letters. He combined words, transforming the physical world out of chaos, making non-existence into existence. This is the originator, the creator. Now, what do you do with this idea if you find that, it's the Hebrew language was the core of all that exists? Does that mean then that the Jewish religion is the only true religion, that Christianity, coming off of Judaism, an offshoot of Judaism, is the only true religion? I don't think you have to take it there. But it's talking about this as the core and the source. The process is better explained in the Qabalah, and this is kind of where we left off the other day talking about this, by means of a spiraling wheel of light, or this wheel inside a wheel inside a wheel. Think of Ezekiel's wheel in a wheel. We've talked about that as being a UFO or an alien craft. It talks about this wheel of light, the spiraling wheel of light, that turns in conjunction with the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, in order from the Aleph to the Tav. And thus it forms 22 letters multiplied by 6, representing the first 6 letters. The very first word of the Torah, the Hebrew word is Barashith, equals 132 if you numerically pull them down. And 22 times 6 is 132, which are indicated as a partition gates to the wheel. And by transposing and permuting the Hebrew letters back and forth around this wheel by a process of diminutions, lessening of light, starting with the Hebrew letter Aleph with all of them, and all of them with Aleph, then the Hebrew letter Bet with all of them, and all of them with Bet, by the way of the wheel, this transformation can be found in the Yetzirah, Sefer Yetzirah. So this transposition is similar to the sequencing the spiral sequencing of human DNA. In fact, geneticists who study DNA have finally discovered the truth behind DNA. When DNA is broken down, it's nothing more than light, the vibration of photons. In essence, it's the basis of virtually all cellular, all systemic function. Further, the chemical reactions can only happen in the cell if the molecule is excited by a photon. Oh, now see, here's stimulating talking. You go, God, I listened to this guy on the radio, and he was talking about how molecules are excited by photons. I mean, this is not, when you start thinking about it, this isn't the grandiose talk, but this is the deeper, the nitty-gritty, and I'm not even to the mathematical, geometric parts of this yet. So, but this is a great basic primer to understanding certain things. When DNA is broken down, it's the molecule that's excited by a photon. One electron has to be activated by a proton, or a photon, I'm sorry. And again, this is directed by electromagnetic wave vibrations, photons. So some religious thinkers conclude that the Torah is beyond just being a guide for our existence, but that the Torah is actually the blueprint of creation itself. If one letter were left out or altered in any way, it would spell destruction for the entire universe. Now, the very interesting thing about this is, remember the Bible says about the Hebrew, the jots and the tittles in the Hebrew language when you write it, not one jot or tittle shall be left out, it says. And that's for this reason. So in order to fully understand the spiraling wheel of light, there's a greater significance concealed behind the number 6. You have to recall that the very first word of the Hebrew Torah, the Hebrew word Barashith, which is found in Genesis 1:1, this word is composed of 6 Hebrew letters, the Bet, the Resh, the Aleph, the Shin, and the Yud, and the Tav. The Hebrew is read right to left. And so this word can be broken into 2 words, bara, meaning to create, and sheath, meaning the number 6 in the Old Aramaic translation. And so in the present day, the Hebrew letter shash means the number 6. Strangely enough, the word barashath is exactly in its full meaning, created 6. And this is kind of where we left off. And there's all kinds of diagrams, things that are all written out about this. I'm going to see if I can describe some of this without losing us or having all our eyes gloss over. What does the word 6 mean, other than that there are 6 letters in the first word? So to find the answer to that, in the Hebrew, each letter of the alphabet also has an orderly numerical value assigned to it. For instance, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, so on. And with this being the case, we find this numerical pattern in the first verse. Genesis 1:1, which contains 7 words. And you add those all up, their numerical values, you end up with 2,701. And this is where all these numerical values come in. When an analysis is made for the value of 2,701, it's found to be 37 times 73 equals 2,701. And the number in the analysis literally designs the Star of David, which is like, think of it as the 2 triangles upside down and laid on top of each other. The Star of David. You can see it on the Israel flag today. Another interesting aspect of this star design allows us to see that it's indeed describing a 6-pointed star that's structured by the mathematical equivalency of pi, 3.14. Okay? You can see how bogged down this could get very easily verbally. Because 28 individual letters used together in Genesis 1:1 can be multiplied by the value of each word together. An amazing value appears. Analysis, but now this is in the original Hebrew. This is the original, what we're claiming, what the theory is, that this is the original holy language, the language founded by God, delivered to Enoch. And you can, you put these all together, and you get a whole value, a whole slew of numbers here. 2 times 200 times 1 times 300 times 10 times 40 equals 48. And there's like 7 different things that you put all these things together. And I can't really show you. So you multiply all the numbers, 48 times 400 times 6 times 4 times 24 times 24 times 9, which is all the numerical values of the Hebrew letters in that verse, gives you 2.3887872. So now you multiply the 7 words together. You get 3.04 blah, blah, blah. Then you take 28, and you know what? This is all stuff that's written down, and I'll give you some source materials where you can go look this stuff up, and you can see it if you need to actually see the numbers. And you end up with all these numerical equations. And now you take it and you divide it by one by the other. You end up with 3.14155487774. Well, conceptually, it's 3.14. It's pi. Its pi to the exact number is 3.14159.265, so on. It presents a slight discrepancy. Albert Einstein once said, God doesn't care about our mathematical difficulties. He integrates empirically. The wit and humor of a scientist. I get that, scientists will say. So another thing to consider is that when you use the Hebrew numerical system, is that the conceptual in orders of magnitude, it's conceptual in orders of magnitude. And because a number says 60,000, it might also mean 600 or 60 or 6. And this is why you get the misinterpretation, of the 6 million Jews or 6 million Hebrews left the land of Egypt in the Exodus. 6 million? Might have been 600,000, might have been 60,000. I don't know how many it was, actually. So proof is an idol before whom the pure mathematician tortures himself. That's what Arthur Stanley Eddington said in The Nature of the Physical World. Pi, if calculated from the first verse of the Bible, again illustrates that the Star of David shape is mathematically pi in its very structure. So, and this is why it was adopted by the Israelites, by the Jews, by the Hebrews. The correct structure is outlined for us in Genesis 1:1. So the Hebrew letter Aleph, being the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, holds the numeric value of 1. Since the Aleph is number 1, it's the first letter to be used in the wheel that rotates counterclockwise. And it combines with the other letters. The following is true, beginning with the Hebrew letter Aleph, with all of them, and with all of them with Aleph. The Hebrew letter Bet, with all of them, and all of them with Bet, can also be read from right to left. And so a spectacular pattern emerges that emphasizes why the number 6 is so important, and uniformly corresponds with the wheel. And further, the 6 Hebrew letter Alephs found in Genesis 1:1 form a 6-pointed star design, the Star of David, as it was later called. And there are precisely 6 Hebrew letter Alephs emphasized by boxes. And so, see, it starts to get bogged down in trying to describe this. So I'm going to skip over a lot of the numeric stuff here and try to get to the meat of this. What's the significance? According to the oral law, the Qabalah, and specifically to the Sefer Yetzirah, the Hebrew letters are to be set around a circle, working as a wheel. And when we reconstruct this, starting at the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Aleph, the result is the wheel of creation, which you take the Aleph and you lay it out in a circle, and the letters form what looks like the points of the 6-pointed Star of David. Now, is that all coincidence? The significance of this is unmistakable. The 6 Hebrew letter Alephs set around a circle forms a distinguishing Star of David. And I don't have this, but you remember what the Aleph looked like. Remember we were talking about the Ain, which you see in the Great Pyramid, but the Aleph, the letter Aleph, you take the point of the Aleph, it comes up and down and over. It almost looks like an A, if you can imagine it. You take that and you put it around in a circle, and 6 equidistant, they form what looks like a Star of David. So taking this a step further, the interchanging, by way of spiraling, creates what's known as gates. There are exactly 132 gates. So 22 by 6, or times 6 is 132, which are the 22 Hebrew letters set around the wheel of the 6 alephs. And the reality of the entire material world is accomplished by the filtering process of the light through the mechanism of the spiraling wheel and its gates. And this is a filtering process of light from photons that works by the diminution or lessening of light. The theory of the Qabalah states that things can only come into being having a physical and material body by way of light when the greater light passes down into the lower degrees of light. And this can only transpire by the use of the Hebrew letters, which are composed of light. And the vibration of photons, the utterance of speech tones. Remember, the utterance of speech tones, the sound is actually made up of light, of photons. And thus these 22 letters from the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph, to the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the Tav, we say Atah, A-T-A-H. Aleph, Tav, and He, creating all that exists. This actual word is found in the Hebrew scripture of Baruch Atah Adonai. Baruch Atah Adonai, which means, blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe. Baruch Atah Adonai. So a greater analogy of the word Atah not only represents all the Hebrew letters from the Aleph to the Tav, but the 5 organs by which speech is produced, the larynx, the palate, the teeth, the lips, the tongue. And it signifies, by the letter He, those numerical values are 5. Its phonic meaning stands for behold, breath, sigh, the sound of ha, as one does when looking at a great sight, or perhaps the moisture of one's breath when fogging up a mirror. That breath. And so to represent the He, as the divine breath, using the outbreathing of the Spirit that gives life. And the sense of the passage is that Atah, God, creates with his breath, accompanied by the 22 divine letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the 5 organs of speech, by the mouth of God. Genesis 2:7 says, and the Lord God formed man, Adam, from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living thing, a living being. So, to help facilitate this process for bringing about life, when the greater light passes down into the lower degrees of light, there's a reduction of light. And this reduction of light is a mere brightness of this living spiritual principle, such as when a ray of sunlight is only a lesser part of the radiance of the sun. God separated, then distilled or concentrated the vibrating photons within the light spread from his mouth. The divine word, the Aleph through Tav, including the divine breath, He, and combined the 22 Hebrew letters using letter changes, substitutions of letters, numerical values, placing the letters side by side. Each change and substitution indicates a refining of light from a lower to a higher degree until the desired level is reached. And this explains the many different levels of life on the earth, from the lowest extremes of inert elements, such as rocks, to simpler living microbes, such as plants, and progressing to more complex insects, animals, ending with humans. So in the field of radiology, the interaction of electromagnetic or EM radiation on biological systems, and with the use of the photomultiplier, studies using photons and living things revealed that the number of photons emitted are linked to the organism's hierarchy. Catch that? The number of photons emitted are linked precisely to the organism's hierarchy. And this corresponds precisely to the order of living things that were created in Genesis 1 through 31. It was experimentally determined that the more complex the organism, the fewer photons were emitted in the language, the speaking it into so. Whereas humans emit less photons. So humans are more refined and thus last because they're most complex. So those who doubt these things, the field of study, semantics, we've talked about this before, we got to revisit that a little bit, involving the investigation and the examination of wave phenomena in sound. So whereas it's been discovered that the Hebrew letter Aleph and its ah sound, as in ata, creates an indefinite, an identifiable pattern with sand particles on a vibrating plate. Remember when we talked about that? And when subjected to the vibration. Now, the conclusion is that when the ah sound is sounded out, it also creates the same six-pointed Star of David type pattern shown in the things that we've already talked about. And so this the other examples, and I did not throw anything up there, but remember talked about the Aleph and the making the wheel the six. It forms that in a sound pattern. The vowel ah, when vibrated in the sand, leaves a little circle in the middle and then this kind of star pattern. Not kind of, it is a star pattern. The edges, the points are a little more rounded, but it's there. So the conclusion can be said that God created the Aleph, the ah sound, which is pre-programmed to generate the other letters. By combining the Hebrew letters together, something from nothing was created as if by magic, when really it's science. The science of magic, the magic of science. It can be noted that the Hebrew language can be compared to the workings of the atomic particles and the chemical DNA to all life. So when the Hebrew letter Aleph is alone, without any other letters connected to it, vowel marks, dots or dashes that are placed underneath, the result is without sound. It's silent. A sound only occurs when joined by other letters. However, in the Torah, there are no dots. There's no dashes. Dots and dashes were only implemented when the Hebrew literacy declined sometime after the Romans expelled the Jews from Israel. So, as for the Aleph being silent when it's used alone, it's signified as something above speech. It's spiritual. Another way of explaining is that when the Aleph is joined by other letters, this signifies the spiritual entering into matter. The Aleph sound, creating the six-pointed star form, can also be seen as a standing wave. Waves are a common feature in nature. A wave can be described as a disturbance that travels through a medium from one location to another location. A standing wave occurs when the interference of two waves traveling in opposite directions, utilizing the same identical and equal frequency, amplitude, resonance, meets its reflection. The spaces that intersect with each other are called nodes. And you knowed what? We got to stop there. We're out of time. So all of you, we'll see you back here tomorrow night. See you here tomorrow morning. If you're a member, watch for the announcement. 6 a.m. Central Standard Time for just a lousy cup of coffee. And if you happen to not be a member and you see that announcement, you're welcome to come in. So we'll open it up. So thanks for being here. Have a good night. See you tomorrow night.